We just studied what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi tells us is a dichotomy, are two polar opposites that exist in the world of philosophy and the world of Judaism. And with that, we can very easily explain the conflict between the Yevanim and the Jewish people. And it seems quite clear that the Yevanim represent the world of the philosopher, and the Chashmonaim represent the world of the Jewish people. That's an idea that's developed later among a number of different Jewish thinkers, but that's not the original way that it was presented. It's certainly not the way that the Rambam presents it. The Rambam presents the threat of the Yevanim in very clear historical, very concretized historical perspective. And he writes, therefore, in the laws of the Chanuka, chapter 3, halacha 1, he writes, "V'vayet sheni kishemalchu Yavan," that in the Second Temple period, when Greece became ascendant, gazru gezerot al Yisrael, they decreed religious decrees preventing the Jews from practicing Judaism. Ubitlu datam v'lo hinichu otam la'asok b'Torah v'mitzvos. They prevented us from being able to study Torah and perform the mitzvot. Upashtu yadam b'mamonam u'vivnotehem. They confiscated their monetary possessions, as well as violating the Jewish girls. V'nichnasu la'echal. And they also violated the temple. Upartzu bo pratzot v'timahu ataharot. And they breached many breaches, and they defiled many things that were pure. V'tzar lahem liYisrael ma'od mivneihem, and the Jewish people suffered greatly under them. V'lachatzum lachatz gadol, and they were placed under tremendous pressures. Ad sherichem aleihem elokei avoteinu v'hoshi'am miyadam, until God saved us. V'gavru b'nei Chashmonai ha'kohanim ha'gedolim v'haragum v'hoshi'israel miyadam. Amidu melech min hakohanim v'chazra malchut Yisrael v'yeter al 200 shana ad chorban hasheni. And the Hasmonean dynasty, as a result, reigned supreme for about 200 years until the destruction of the Second Temple. The Rambam does not talk about any of the ideological threats from the Yevanim. He just talks about the religious persecution of the Yevanim who tried to stop us from practicing our religion. That in itself is a reason to celebrate Chanuka. What about the ideological threats that we hear so much about, the Hellenization of the Jewish people? That is not something that the Rambam emphasizes. Now, I can't speak for the Rambam and tell you that this is definitively why the Rambam writes what he does and omits what he does. That would be presumptuous of me. But I want you just to recall that as much as Rabbi Yehuda Halevi creates a dichotomy between philosophy and Judaism, the Rambam, quite contrary to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, seeks to synthesize the two and feels that the study of philosophy actually enhances one's religious experience. And if that's the case, do you remember we discussed this? And if so, the question then becomes, what kind of Chanukah story does the Rambam subscribe to? Are the Yevanim really the bad guys, or are they the good guys? Did they present to us with tremendous evil, or they did to provide us with a great, beautiful gift? Do you understand the conflict that we may have if we're Maimonidean in our thinking? Yes.
But the Greek culture at the time of Hanukkah, they were worshiping many gods. They weren't like philosophers who were not believing in any gods, and they were a very hedonistic culture of worshiping physicality. So it seems like it's a very different world.
Yes, the truth is both worlds. It's a very good question. The truth is both worlds existed simultaneously. You had the world of the Greek hedonists and the Epicureans, and you also had the world of the Greek philosophers. There's no contradiction. Both of them exist simultaneously. As a matter of fact, you could have an Aristotle living at the same time as the pantheons and as the gymnasia, because the philosopher is able in some way to sort of bifurcate his life and say, the way I live my life is different from the way I intellectualize and the way I talk about theory. And And there are multiple ideas that are circulating within the philosophical world as well. There are disputes between philosophers as to.
Because in what we read, they put down the physical world because it takes you away from your philosophical.
That's true. That's the perfected philosopher. But that doesn't negate the fact that the common Greek was very much a Hellenist, was very much involved with, and very much a hedonist, and very much involved with the pleasures of the world. But it's very clear that the Rambam is not critical of the philosophy of the Greeks. He's critical of the religious persecution of the Greeks, and that's one of the things that I think is important to note. If you take a look at some of the later commentaries, there's a beautiful shtickle by the Bnei Yissaschar from the 19th century, who writes that, and we'll take a look quickly at it, he says, Naas, it's the second source in your sheet. He says, Naase hanes al yedei or haner daika. He says, the miracle of Chanukah takes place through the lights of the menorah. He says, that was not just a coincidence. He says, that was quite deliberate on Hashem's part. Kino rahu. Nirali, the hine darshu chazal, because our sages tell us on the pasuk, v'ha'aretz hayasas sohu, that the world was tohu. What is the word? The word tohu, chaos. That refers to the exile of Bavel, of Babylonia. Uvohu refers to the exile of Madai, of Media, or Persia. V'choshech, and darkness, refers to the exile of Yavan, refers to the Greek exile, the Greek domination of the Jews. And al Pnei Tehom, on the face of the deep, refers to the deep and long and protracted exile of the fourth exile. Hineni kreit malchut Yavan choshech. So you see that the kingdom of Yavan is called darkness. Kamoshe kasafti lael. You can skip the parentheses. Shahanigut shelahem hu lakoach hasichli Yisrael. That the tremendous threat of the Greek world was the intellectual threat that the Greeks presented to the Jewish people. V'hinei haseichel hu haner hameir el ha'adam. That what does seichel represent? What does intellect represent? That's the metaphor for intellect is the light. That's why that when a light bulb goes off in your head, that's what it means. This is a light, an intellectual light. Lahanchehu lahadrichehu b'magalei tzedek, because it's the intellect of man that guides him and provides him with a beacon of understanding and of guidance. V'hinei kol ha'chochmot chitzoniyot hem kesilot neged chochmat haTorah. So the Bnei Yissaschar writes that all external areas of wisdom are folly when compared to the wisdom of Torah. V'chemo shekina otam shlomo eshet kesilot homiya v'soreret. That's King Solomon actually makes reference to that when he writes his book of Proverbs, and he talks about the wife of mankind being wisdom, but he talks about that type of wisdom outside of Torah knowledge as the foolish wife. Al ken nikraim choshech v'lo or, and that's why they're called darkness and not light. V'hinei malchut Yavan biritzotam levatel chochmat haTorah ulahagvir chas v'shalom. Because the Greeks sought to dominate the Jews not only physically, but also to dominate the way that they used their minds, used their intellects, and wanted to actually Hellenize not only our way of life, but the way that we thought. They wanted us to think like Greeks. They are therefore called darkness. And that's why God provides a miracle which represents the light of Torah to say that the Torah transcends the natural order of wisdom, which is what the philosophers had. V'chasher tavin od, v'hinei Yavan menagdima b'chochmatam. Says, think about it more, he says. Greece represents the opposing wisdom, chochmat ha-philosophia ve'hateva, that is the study of philosophy and nature and science. He says, l'seichel, v'chochmatam shel Yisrael, that opposes directly the intellect and wisdom of the Jewish people. Shehu chochmat ha-Torah shehi lo ma'ala min hateva, which is the wisdom of Torah which transcends nature, which transcends science, which tells us, and this is really very Halevian in its outlook, that there is something intrinsic within this world which transcends intellectual, philosophical speculation. You cannot create a logical explanation of how shaking a lulav is able to create spiritual perfection. There's just no way to get there if you're just using philosophical logic. And that's what the Chokhmah of Torah represents. V'hinei ratzu b'chokhmatam hativ'iyit choshech v'lo or levatel chokhmat haTorah asher hi l'ma'ala min hateva. So that's what the Greeks sought to do. They wanted to suppress and conquer using their natural intellect to take a supernatural intellect of the Jewish people, the supernatural wisdom of the Torah, and to suppress it. Al kain ba'et Yeshuat Yisrael HaYehudim hayta orazu Torah shelo keteva. And that's why, what was the salvation of the Jewish people? It is through the light that transcended the natural order. The light of the Chanukah lights that we lit in the temple, and they miraculously burned for 8 days instead of 1 day, represents the transcendence of nature in light itself. There's a natural light, just like there's natural and scientific knowledge based on human logic, and then there's a certain kind of wisdom that transcends the natural, that transcends the philosophy of the Greeks. And just like there's a light that transcends, the light of knowledge that transcends the natural order, the lights of the menorah transcended the natural order to represent the fact that we would not be suppressed, that that wisdom that we contained in the Torah, which is supernatural, could not be conquered by the natural wisdom of the Greeks. So once again, I say to you, is there a way that the Rambam can live with this model of Hanukkah? And I think that there is. And based on time constraints, let me just get to to another, even more contemporary writing, also a Hasidic writing from the Shem Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel Borstein of Sachachav, who is a brilliant Hasidic thinker, who provides us with this whole concept of the dichotomy between the natural order and the supernatural order. So he explained, I'm just trying to find he says, Al Kain, it's in the middle of the first paragraph. He says, Al Kain yesh b'koach haTorah l'shanot teva hamidot mimahutan shenivru kacha, u'v'koach haTorah yuchlu l'ishtanot l'teva acher. He says, there's no question that there are other forms of wisdom in the world, but those other forms of wisdom will not intrinsically change the individual, will not change the individual's character and moral fiber. The wisdom of the Torah, which is the supernatural wisdom that we've just learned about, is the only kind of wisdom that actually can transform a person's character and moral fiber. And he explains that's in the first part of the paragraph, he explains that the 7 branches of the menorah in the temple actually represent 7 areas of wisdom that can actually impact a person's moral fiber, moral character. And he explains, he continues, he says, "Umuvan me'elav shelo chokhmah hativit ein koach zeh leshanot hamidot mimahutan." He says, no natural order of philosophy or science can actually work upon the very core of the individual's personality and transform it. Ki af sheyedah ha'adam v'yaskil heitev b'chokhmah hativit she'ein na'elo lihiyot lahut achar hata'ava. Even if a person studies the natural sciences and studies philosophy, and he comes to the conclusion that it's not healthy, as the philosopher has already taught us, that it's not healthy to pursue physical lusts and desires, because it's going to act as a distraction from intellectual perfection. But nevertheless, mikol makom haruach hativit einena mishtanet mikamo shaita. But a person's natural fiber, his natural character, and his intrinsic nature doesn't change as a result of philosophy. And he proves it. He says that, he says, Kamosha Sipra, I'm just skipping a couple of lines. They say a story about about Aristotle, Rosh HaPhilosophim, Shehu Ba'atzmo Chiber Sefer Hamidot. He wrote the Nicomachean Ethics. He wrote books about moral behavior and the pursuit of happiness. And yet he himself was still not the Hevin B'Seichel Enoshi Shabo Kama Garua Hu Ba'al Ta'ava. He himself wrote about how despicable and lowly a person who indulges in his lusts is. Nevertheless, Umikol Makom Meit Mecholi Shehala Libo Tina. He died how? Because he became ill, because he was filled with a sense of jealousy and frustration. And so you see that even though he was a great philosopher and he understood intellectually the way a person is supposed to live his life, it still could not have that transformative effect on who he was as a person because he didn't have Torah. He may be referring here, there's a famous medieval book called The Apple that is attributed to Aristotle. It seems to be a fictitious account of Aristotle's death. There are actually a number of different accounts of how Aristotle died. Some say that he died because he was contemptuous of life, and others say that as he was on his deathbed, he sniffed an apple, right, and he realized that life was without meaning and purpose, and he just dropped the apple, and as the apple fell to his bed, he expired, he passed away. So the fact of the matter is that Aristotle died a very unhappy man, and you would expect that a person who had reached intellectual perfection should have been transformed to the happiest of people, and yet that was not to be. And just to finish these last few lines, he says, "V'hinei haYevanim shaltu az al Yisrael, b'chol magamatam lahashkicham toratecha ulihitnaheg al pi seichel enoshi." The whole objective of the Greeks was to cause us to forget Torah, the transformative effect that Torah has on our lives, and to only guide our lives through the human intellect. V'af shechibru gam kein sfarim b'torat hamidot, even though they also wrote books about how to perfect one's character and refine one's ethics. Mikol makom hayedi'ah nishara nifredet mehamidot, but they were unable to synthesize the knowledge and the behavior. Ubevadei shebechochmatam hayu ma'at nitzotzei kedusha shenaflu b'shvirat hakelim. He says there's no question that within Greek philosophy is contained sparks of holiness that fell when we have this concept that the Arizal talks about of the shviras hakelim, of the breaking of the utensils, and therefore there were sparks of holiness that spread throughout the world. He says, "Dim lo kein lo haisa lahem chiyus klal," otherwise they would not have been able to survive at all. And so I believe that last line is the way the Rambam is going to understand Chanuka, is that what we did is not to completely reject the Greeks, but that we took all the goodness that was contained within them and we integrated it within Judaism and made it part of our Torah. That, I think, is one way. In other words, you have two approaches. You have two approaches to the Chanukah story. Approach number one is to say that there's this dichotomy and never shall the two meet. There's the Greeks and there's the way of the Torah, and the two are antithetical to each other, and therefore what Chanukah represents is the victory of that which is antithetical to Torah. And the other way to look at it is to say that what we succeeded in doing is not in allowing the Greeks to dominate us, but rather we dominated the Greeks and harnessed the beauty of the Greek philosophical world, and we're able to use it in order to develop our Torah and to refine whatever the Torah contained and to unlock the secrets of the Torah even more using the Greek philosophical method. I don't know which one is correct. I just want you to know that both of them may be correct and both of them may be acceptable, and it's up to the individual to find that message within Chanukah that resonates with him or her. Yeah?
To the utensils and sparks.
There's a famous Kabbalistic principle that when God created the world, there was something called the shattering of the vessels. That there were these vessels that contained holiness, and when the world could not contain those vessels in their entirety because the sparks were too powerful. And the nature of the physical world caused these vessels to shatter, and the sparks of holiness were scattered throughout the world, and it is the function of the Jew to glean those sparks of holiness and bring them back into the fold of the Jewish people. So that's one of the reasons why the Arizal said that we are spread out through the diaspora, is because wherever the Jews have been, we have been deposited in places where the sparks are, and it's our role and our job to gather those sparks and bring them into the Jewish people. So when we were in Poland, there were Polish sparks, and we gathered those in, and that became part of the Jewish people. When we were in Morocco, we had Moroccan sparks, and we had to glean those sparks. And when we were in the United States and Canada, there are North American sparks, and we have to glean those sparks. And when all of those sparks will have been gleaned properly by the Jewish people, it'll be ready for us to move on, hopefully back to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, have a Freilich and Chanukah, everyone, if you want to take more
Can I
questions.
ask a question? How it's connected with the fact that it was allowed to translate Torah into Greek? Because there is something which is possible in Greek.
Yes, it's very consistent with what we're saying. There is a certain intrinsic greatness within the Greek language that Chazal were cognizant of that resonates with Torah.